Hi, I'm Jean Fiorini. Thanks for tuning into the Tarot Tips. Today's segment was prompted by a question that a subscriber sent in, and it is something that I really never would have thought of to present options about. So thank you so much for the comments and the requests. Keep them coming because it lets me know where people might be struggling, having some issues with their cards, trying to find their own way with working with the tarot and bumping into things that maybe I can give some options or some techniques for. So thanks very much for this question, which is there any special or significant way to shuffle your cards before the layout or before you use them in whatever spread or method that you're going to be using? And I like this question for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's one of those, it's all the stuff that has to happen before you even get to the actual reading of the cards. There's a lot of kind of mental, emotional, and mechanical prep that does go into doing a reading, and this is one of those areas. So the idea of how you, essentially what this question is, how do you get your cards ready to be used in whatever way you've decided you're going to use them? For me, this is a question that relates to the kind of layout that I'm going to use, because I do handle my cards a little differently depending on the method that I'm going to be utilizing with the client. But then the method is always related to the kind of query, the kind of question, the kind of reading that we're going to do. These things are really spelled out, I must say, nicely in my Tarot Spreads and Layouts User's Manual book. This notion that there's a lot that has to happen before you even get to the point of, okay, now we're going to put the cards on the table and see what we see. Again, I really like the question. So the notion of how do you shuffle your cards is connected to the kind of layout that you're going to use, and the kind of layout you're going to use is determined by the kind of question the kind of question or the kind of reading that we're going to do. So let me say that in general, I like to set my cards on the window, whether it's sunny or not, and in the state of Maine, you never know. But put your cards in the window if you can, put some crystals or some rocks or something to help kind of clear them of whatever was going on in the reading previously. If I'm doing a relatively straightforward questioning session with a client, if we're asking pretty simple questions, or if we're using a layout that maybe has less than 5 cards, I'm going to do the very fancy smooshing method. And this is just taking them, putting them out on the table, making a big pile, they're all face down, and drawing from what you could think of as a pond. It's like you're going fishing here in the pond. Everything is available to you. Now, there might be a question about who draws the cards. In a method like this, I always like for the client to draw the card, because that makes them responsible for what they get. It's not me picking the card for them. So this idea that we just put them all in a very, very loose pile, we shuffle them, we move them around, we put our hands on them until we feel like we're ready, we're clear about our question, we draw however many cards we need. If I'm going to be doing the Celtic layout, it is a different story. With that layout, there are 10 cards. There are very complicated connections between the positions in that reading. So when I'm doing something with that many variables, I like to make sure I've got as many of my ducks lined up as I can. So in that case, I do use a much more organized way of getting my cards ready to be put into the layout. And it does start with the setting them in the window and putting the crystals and the stones on top of them just to sort of clear them out. But in this case, also when I'm doing a Celtic layout, I do like to order my deck. And so for me, that means putting the major cards in order, Fool through 21, and then I line up the suit cards, Ace through King, Wands first, then Cups, then Swords, and then Pentacles, which is the way that the elements come down the tree of life, with Pentacles being the suit of the manifest. You know, these are not things that are written in stone. This is just over time become the method that I like to use, like I said, to make me feel like I've got as many of my ducks lined up before I work with this very complicated layout, the Celtic layout. So after I have ordered the cards, I put them in the window, whatever, it doesn't matter really for how long. To me, that feels like they're clean and clear and ready to go. So in this case, I do ask the client either to shuffle, but I really prefer that they just smoosh them because many people are not comfortable with shuffling cards. They're either not very good at it, they're not comfortable with it, they feel like they might be doing it wrong or clumsy or whatever, and you don't want to start off a session with a client or the other person being uncomfortable. So I really like for the client, plus it's relaxing, to just take your hands, move them over your cards, smear them on the table until you're ready, and you put them back into a pile. Whenever you're ready, the client puts them back into the pile. And then once we do that, I still, okay, and here's where it comes into intuition. I still like for them to inject their story into the cards by dividing the cards into as many piles as they want and then restack them however they want. There's no trick to that. It's just a question of imprinting their story on the cards so that then we can look at it when we're ready to lay out the cards. Once the client has done that in a way that they're comfortable, then I ask them to divide them into 3 piles and restack them again back into 1 pile. And then I ask them to cut them, and we cut them as many times until I feel that intuitively, okay, there's where we need to be. There's the story. And again, I often wonder, does it really matter? But it matters to me because it makes me comfortable. So all of these things are intended as guidelines, as hints for you. It's not the right way to do it. You have to find your own way, especially with a complicated layout like that 10 card. Sometimes it becomes an 11 card layout with the Celtic spread. And because of the complexity of it and all the different ways things piece together, it's important that you, as the reader, you enter into it with as much confidence as you can. When I feel intuitively that the cards are ready to be put into the layout, then I deal them out in the pattern of the layout and we go from there. Let me also say that before every reading, again, it's a personal choice, but I just say a little prayer and ask for guidance and help and to have the conversation that will be what my client needs to hear today. So in some ways, for me, that means that I don't have to be right, but it does mean that we have to be saying the things that are going to be significant, meaningful, helpful, useful for the person on the other side of the tarot table. So I hope that rather than confuses, but I hope that clarifies some of both the issues and maybe giving you some techniques about how to shuffle before you do a reading. Essentially, if the reading is a pretty simple and straightforward one, my suggestion is to just use the smooshing. That way, like I said, it's very relaxing. It can be kind of soothing for somebody to just take their hands and move them around. Listen to that nice clicking sound the card makes. And when you're ready, pose your question, pull out your cards, and then read what you get. Celtic Cross is a little bit more complicated, so I do like to have a little bit more order and structure for that. So thank you very much for that question. I appreciate it. Again, not to press too hard on the Tarot Spreads and Layouts book, but it really is a very good resource for these kinds of how do I work with my cards kinds of questions. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.